Hello everyone, this is Claudia, and in my next card video I'm going to explain how I just use the sentiment from a stamp set and then I build around it. And I did that because I don't own that many nice flower stamps that I could color in, but also sometimes you just have a sentiment, you want to use it but you don't know what to do with it. And the best thing that I can think of is I stamp the sentiment kind of in the middle and then I'm going to doodle around it some flowers. And that is because I don't really have flowers that have, flower stamps with lines that I could color in, and I thought that it wouldn't be that hard to actually just doodle some flowers. So in order to do that, I really paired my cardstock. This is some black cardstock I had, and it comes in really big A3 size sheets that I just cut down, and I usually use them for my albums, but now I just had some left over. So I stamped all with Versamark ink, which is really sticky ink, so that my embossing powder can stick to everything and not stick around it. And I put some white embossing powder, and then I'm just with my fingers getting rid of all the small dots of embossing powder that really didn't want to go away from the card. And I'm trying to heat up the powder from both sides, from the back and from the front. That kind of eliminates a bit of the warping, although as you can see here it still is warping a little bit. Now I was preparing my doodle pens, and I have some white pens. I wasn't sure which one I'm going to use. I have a broad uniball signal and I have a very small fine uniball signal, and I chose that one. The broad one I will use at the end really makes thick lines, so I wasn't sure if, because the sentiment is white and is thick, I wasn't sure if I needed thick lines for the flowers. And the trick I do here is that I doodle on the two corners of the sentiment and I just build the flowers around it, kind of like you would stamp it when you would stamp and mask around it, so the flowers really look like they're coming from behind. And this way of doodling is not really that hard, you just need a little bit of practice. When I first started with this kind of flowers, they looked not so nice, I would say sometimes horrible but like after a few tries you get the hang of it, that it's just curved lines, straight lines and more lines, basically a lot of lines, a lot of filling in the spaces. As you can see here, I'm just drawing in lines, and that's kind of it. And how you do it, you just build from there. So you start in two corners and then you start to build more and more and more, like you add a leaf there, you add a small flower there, and so on. Like now I'm adding a leaf and it's just the shape of the leaf and then lines, so everything is either curved or just straight lines. And you know, each flower kind of looks like it's coming from behind the other flower, and each petal and the leaves the same. Now the reason why I'm turning my paper is I really want the best angles drawing, because the uniball signal pen is like pigmenting and it dries not so fast. So if I would touch with my hand the portion that I just draw, it will smear, and I really didn't want the white ink to smear. So I really need to be careful not to draw in the same portion as I drew before, so I wouldn't touch the part. So I'm alternating between one corner and the other. So this is how I decided this card is going to be. It's very simple in my opinion. It just has the sentiment and it gives so much power that you're doodling around the sentiment, and the sentiment will stand out more because you're using thinner lines than thicker lines. And I'm always going to try to make one of the corners, let's say, bigger and with more flowers than the other ones. Now I switched to a silver pen, and you cannot see it right now in the video, but it looks much better than the white pen. Actually, it gives a little bit of sparkle to the flowers. And now I decided that I'm going to color them in, and I wanted to use my twinkling H2Os. So I chose some of them that were really transparent. There's basically like, it's like perfect pearls but already made with water and in a hardened form. So what you do first, you wet them a little bit with some water, and then they kind of exit the solid state and enter in this kind of paste state from which you can just pick up color. And when it dries, it's very transparent but also very, very shiny. It's exactly like perfect pearls in my opinion, but just in solid form, not in powder form. Powder form sounds more like very hard to manage because you get powder everywhere, and these are much easier to color with. And although the colors that you see there are not looking really like the colors that end up with, so you really have to carefully read what says on the back. For example, only the gold really looks like gold, but the white one in the corner was actually purple, but when you look at the twinkling H2O, is almost white. So yeah, you have to be careful which colors you choose. So I had the gold, and the one that looks more like brownish is actually green. And I will do the leaves with it. I'm trying to alternate the sides where I put the colors. So I'm putting the gold on one of the flowers in one side and on the other one. And now I'm just going to do the leaves with the green. My initial idea was just to alternate the parts where the leaf will be green and then black, but then I decided I will color everything with the green. And I'm using a really fine, it's actually a watercolor brush, but I'm using really fine brush. Now this also, you need to let it a bit dry out because it's kind of like watercolor. It's still watery, but it dries out much faster. So by the time I closed down all my bottles of twinkling H2Os, it had dried. And now I'm going to do a small border, and I'm using actually the broad white paint, and this one creates a much thicker line. So making a line all around the design, and I'm going to make some leaves around it, some very small leaves. I didn't realize at first that I didn't leave enough space on the other side, so I can make leaves also on the other side of the line, but I think in the end they looked okay. So this is what I call, like, if you have just a sentiment, you don't know what to do, just doodle around it. Just make the sentiment the center part of your card, and then just spread around from there. This way you can get a lot more mileage of your sentiment stamps, and you don't really need to buy flower stamps for doing this. Now, as a base, I needed something to totally contrast the black and to show that it's still kind of a summery card. I know the kit was for summer, but I'm really not a summer person. So I just had the Simon's stamp. I think it's the yellow one, and I just realized that my trimmer really needs a new blade. But you know, other than that, that was kind of it. Because everything was a bit buckling from the intense heat of the melting of the embossing powder, I decided to use score tape to really adhere everything down on the card. And as always with score tape, don't adhere it down until you know for sure where you are doing it, because once it's down it won't come up. I was lucky enough that I kind of centered it the first time before I realized I couldn't pick it up more. Anyway, I hope you liked this video, and I hope you're gonna give it a try. I mean, try it with a sentiment stamp and just doodle around, just try it. There's no right or wrong, just pick some sides and just spread around. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you next time.